Welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, this is the show where I invite people to chat in the blog cabin virtually. And today I am chatting with author Gordon Hutchinson of his book, Reality Bites. And your book is so funny. But you've actually come to writing in an unusual way. You actually lived in Japan. You wrote a book about geishas, gangsters, and monks and me. You have such a varied career. How did you come into writing?
Okay, well, I need to back up for a second and not jump right into that. I was in Japan and I had some, like I said, some very weird experiences early on, but then I kind of got a day job. I was an advertising copywriter. So I've been a writer for a long time, but I never dreamed about being an author. But when I got back to America, I had 3 books in my head. None of them were anywhere close to related, so it would not be the kind of subject matter you build a platform on like most successful writers do. But I was lucky. I wasn't depending on book sales to, provide the rent. So Reality Bites is the second one. And Gangsters, Geishas, Monks, and Me is the first one. And these two could not be farther apart. But I didn't plan to write a book about this. I didn't plan to put it in book form because it was basically just a diary for me. And I was a copywriter, so it gave me a kind of closure to put things down in coherent form, in words. And somehow that gave me more control over the situation because most of these come from some level of frustration. Me reacting to the craziness of the world. So how this book became a book is also a long story, but I'll let you ask questions and we'll get around to that.
Well, let's talk about living in Japan first, because you have a BA in psychology and religion from Duke. So go Blue Devils, because I'm a big Blue Devil fan. So go Duke. And then you hitchhike across America, and then you landed in Japan. How? Why?
Why? Because I did graduate from Duke. I got pretty good grades, but I wasn't ready to, go to post-grad. And back then, unlike your daughter and my son, we had more wiggle room. And so I traveled, but then I hit a reality wall when I tried to actually get a job. And they laughed me out of every interview that I went to. And to make a long story short, I said, to hell with this. And I decided to take it on the road, but on a grander scale. In other words, go around the world. And I was lucky enough to get a job teaching English in Sapporo, Japan, which is in the capital of the top island, Hokkaido. And I had been planning to start from Europe, but I said, well, east, west, either one works for me. So I went that way. And then I thought it would be rude not to learn the language, because that was in 1975. And almost all the foreigners in Japan at that time were English teachers, and they couldn't speak Japanese. And that was how they got by. And I thought that was rude. If you're going to go to a country, then at least you should make the effort. And as I was making the effort, I came to fall in love with it. And I was in my late 20s at that time, and that was the first time I had ever come upon something that enveloped me so much that I could see doing something with it. And then it turned into a very, very fun, creative, and lucrative profession. But at that time, it was just, well, I'm not staying here a year like I planned. I'm going to, stay another year and then see what happens. And, 1 year turned into 30. And that's, after about 2 years, that's when I went into the Zen temple and lived in the little town of Obama. Actually, there is a town called Obama. And that's where all the weirdness started. But I was very lucky, put it this way. Most people couldn't have taken that much time off and come out of it with a pair of new shoes. So very, very lucky.
Now let's talk about Obama, because your book, Gangsters, Geishas, Monks, and Me, because I read up a little bit, part of the proceeds went to the people that suffered from the tsunami, correct?
Yes. Not a whole lot, because I didn't promote the book very much. However, in 1995, as you might not remember, there was a huge earthquake in Kobe. And Kobe is near Kyoto, and Kyoto is fairly near Obama. Okay, they're all in the Kansai area of Japan. And a friend of mine, I was in Tokyo at the time, and a friend of mine came to me and she said, well, why don't we do a charity t-shirt? And I said, okay. So we did a charity t-shirt for the survivors of the earthquake. And long story short, we were able to give $15,000 to 3 organizations. One, the Board of Education of Kobe, to use in buying new textbooks. The next one was for, I didn't choose that. The father of this the father of this girl's boyfriend, who was Japanese and worked for the government, chose that. The ones that I chose were handicapped people who worked at a factory where they made things for sale, and the factory got totally leveled in the earthquake. That's one set. And the last, it wasn't an organization, it was just a bunch of people who had set up tents in a public park because their houses had been destroyed. And we tried to find, originally when we were still back in Tokyo, we tried to find an organization who would give that money to the people in need. But when I asked the charity, where is this money going to go? They said, well, we can't give you that information. So I said, well, to hell with you. And I hand carried that money to Kobe, and I gave it to the people who needed it. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. So when it came to finally putting out Gangsters, that was still fresh in my memory, even though it was from the mid-90s, because I put out Gangsters in spring of 2012 sometime, and the Fukushima tsunami and all the other stuff that went with it happened in 2011. So that was fresh in my mind. And like I said, I did not promote the book just because I'm not into glad handing very much. So I wasn't able to give as much as I wanted to, but the spirit was there.
Yeah. I love that, because a lot of authors don't even think about giving back to other places. They just want all the money for themselves. And I love the fact that you weren't selfish and you said, okay, part of the proceeds is going to go back there.
Well, I was in a very lucky position because I wasn't depending on this money for rent. I had come back to America partially to take care of my mother, who was very sick, and live with my parents. And so I was blessed by, having the luxury of being able to do that. And it's the same luxury that allowed me to put out Reality Bites, which is absolutely 180 degrees different from Gangsters. And the next book I'm writing is it's about Japan, but it's nothing like that. And so it's just me in my old age playing, playing around.
In your old age. I love that. Now let's talk about Reality Bites, because it was hysterical. So tell me, what was the meaning behind that? Why was the reasoning behind you writing this?
There is no reasoning. It just, and it's interesting, and I will explain why in a second, but Reality Bites was basically a diary, of me reacting to life. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of that was frustration. And the first one-liner I ever wrote, which is the first one in the book, was me thinking about old age. Maybe you could read that, because I don't know it verbatim by heart.
It says, life is a series of progressively less successful ventures in crisis management.
Exactly. Okay. Yes, that's it. And I don't know where that came from, but I said, that hits home. Mm-hmm. And from there, that was also in 1995. And from there, they just kept coming, and I didn't push them out. I let them come, and which is why it took, 20 years to get enough good ones, at least, to do something like that. And then I'll tell you, how I discovered what it really meant to me. And that was when I had all these one-liners, and most of them are not really aphorisms, and I'll talk about that in a second. But so I had hundreds and hundreds of one-liners, some of which were aphorisms, but not all. And I just started thinking about putting out a book, but I didn't know anything about aphorisms or anything related to that. So I started reading other books, but very, very few people. I only know one other guy who writes original one-liners. I don't write them, but because this is a one-off for me. He makes a profession out of it, okay? But I didn't know how to begin writing an introduction, so I started reading other people's compilations of how they handled their introductions. And I, being a copywriter, I'm a wordsmith. I like wordplay, et cetera, and I love one-liners, especially the sarcastic ones. So I would read, all these books, and as I was reading 50 or 60 books, and after a while, it became just as much fun to read the one-liners as it was educational to read the introductions. But I read just over and over and over, I found people, celebrities from the past, who were saying exactly the same thing that I was. Mm. And in one case, I found, and I can remember this, it's those who live for the hunt rarely savor the kill. Okay. And basically that's, when you've got something, you don't treat it as well. Yeah. When you're chasing it, like if you're chasing a woman, but when you get her, you don't appreciate her. Mm-hmm. Well, I found 16 of those from 2,000 years ago that were saying the exact same thing. And that was fascinating to me. But at the same time, it gave me a strange sense of validation. That was my first feedback of the book. And I was humbled to find myself in such distinguished company. But so I decided to include all those other, those quotes from other people who were saying the exact same thing, because I thought that might add an interesting feature that, people might like instead of just boom, 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 boom. Mm-hmm. And it seems that I was right. But that was the tipping point. Plus, by that time, I had an idea of how to write an introduction, which I did. And that was a tipping point that kind of pushed me into, well, let's publish it.
Because you have a lot of one-liners.
That's what they are. They're one-liners, and you asked me what an aphorism is, and actually there are notes here somewhere. It's in the introduction, but the definition I looked up is a pithy observation that contains a general truth, which is true. And then a guy named James Cary, who is one of the authorities in the field, gives the 5 conditions for an aphorism. It must be brief. It must be definitive. And I explained that I'm not sure what that is. It must be personal. It must have a twist, and it must be philosophical. And I don't necessarily agree with him on that last one, but I guess that's basically what he's saying is the same as the definition in containing a general truth. But as you will understand, in fact, most of the one-liners in my book are not aphorisms. Some are, mm-hmm. but not most. I mean, I'm asking, I ask a lot of questions. And once I started to feel validated, I also realized that I was reaching out to see if other people felt the same way that I do, which is that this world is batshit crazy. And in fact, I think I put it in the introduction, but a lot of these things are funny, intentionally so, some not intentionally so. But when I looked at it from that different perspective, I realized that a lot of those ones that make you laugh are laughing to keep from crying, which is so much the case in today's world,
So I love the way you formatted it, where it's quick and easy. You can pick it up and read it whenever you have time, and it's like you got they're like numbered. So how long did it take you to come up? Like you said, you started in 1995.
Because I didn't have a deadline. There were no publishers beating down my door. And take a rock group. The music company is saying, you got to put this out. You got to give us 12 songs in a year. And so they come out with less than, satisfactory, or things they're not satisfied with. I, again, had the luxury of taking all the time I wanted to. And truth be told, I put Reality Bites out in 2015, the first version. And then I would start reading it, again, full disclosure, while I was waiting for the bathtub to fill up, 5 minutes a day. And I'm thinking, oh, who the hell wrote this in some cases? And so I started rewriting a lot of them, completely rewriting some of them. And then I got it reviewed on Kirkus, and I was surprised at how good a review they gave me for something I wasn't 100% satisfied with in retrospect. And then a woman from the advertising department said, well, look, we're giving special discounts on books on our recommended list. And I said, recommended list? What? And so apparently there's no record of this, but Kirkus does have a recommended list, and Reality Bites is on it. The top books are blue star reviews. And those are among the top 2 and 3% of the ones reviewed. Well, the recommended list, there's, again, no record of it, but there is apparently such a list. And I thought that, well, given that, circumstance, then maybe I will. And it took 3 years to get around to do it, but to doing it. But it gave me an emphasis to actually go through and polish some of the stuff I had, and I'm glad I did, because this, some are better than others, but I don't cringe when I, read through the book.
So it's always better the second time around, correct?
Well, not for marriage, in as you might have told, this is not the kind of book you read for romantic inspiration. I have a bad track record with marriage, not from lack of trying, but it's so there are a lot of one-liners on relationships, good and bad, but marriage, not so much. So people who are looking for religious inspiration might want to keep looking too, because it's a little irreverent in those areas.
But funny.
Hopefully, because one of them was, where would Christianity be without capital punishment? You think about that for a while. Mm-hmm. Some people laugh, and some people want to burn a cross in my yard. And that's the whole thing, is and this guy Cary is right, they are very, very personal. So if, a lot of people, if they've had that experience, then some of them can get around the irreverence. Some of them can't. And I didn't, I know it's not for everybody. When I think about giving a book to somebody, I have to think long and hard about who I'm giving it to. Are they going to enjoy it, or are they going to be offended? And so I don't just go handing these things out willy-nilly.
Wow. So I know I asked you to read some from your book. Are you willing to do that?
Well, this is not the kind of situation where you do a reading, but I pulled out some, and as I said, it's sorry, I'm out of the picture. It's a diary basically, so it shows the changes in me. And I came back to America when I was 55, and so I was, I was younger, a lot younger in Japan. And when I came back here, I had a kid, and older. And so it's interesting to look at the changes, okay? And I'll illustrate. One of the snarkier entries is right in the beginning. If you can't say something nice, say it first. Which some people like that. Some people, think I have a twisted personality. And then there is life is too short to play fair. I wrote that basically. I channeled the American in me, and the same thing with if you can't beat them, sue them, which is that's pure Americana. Okay, and I wrote that in Japan, but I had probably seen some news. And then there are the ones that I said, when after my son was born, I was looking at kids in a completely new way and raising kids in a completely new way. And so the next two were about that. Children are God's way of letting parents know if they're having a nice day. And that's, every parent, I would assume most parents can empathize with that. And there's another one that's that more distracted parents might like. If God can't make his children obey, what's a parent to do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I happen to be an only son, and I feel fortunate about having been an only son. And I'm sure that came through in these two. Treasure friendship, revere love, honor family, but remember, in the end, you're all you've got. Mm-hmm. And at some of my, I like people, but I'm, you come into the world by yourself, you leave it by yourself, mm-hmm. and, you better make the best of it, because, you are in the end alone. And there's, a lot of people haven't come to terms with that. And me being an only child, I kind of had a head start, and doing the Zen in Japan gave me a new, a new awareness of that, of you're basically training to deal with death. Okay. And we're going down a dark rabbit hole here, but the other one is something that I have noticed a lot, especially in the pandemic. In fact, another interviewer picked this one out, and he said it was perfect for the pandemic, and that is, solitude is the opportunity to get better acquainted with yourself. Mm-hmm. Loneliness is the failure to take advantage of that opportunity. And so, there are some serious ones and some not so serious ones. Do you want me to go on? Hell, I could go on.
How do you come up with the idea to make it into a book, though?
Well, there was a process for that. In the beginning, okay, here's another one. Dirty minds think more. That's a t-shirt slogan. And in fact, I made a series, a t-shirt series for foreigners in Japan that regular tried and true Americans wouldn't really get, but foreigners who live in Japan would definitely get. And so I was, and the t-shirt that we made for the the earthquake survivors. So, that's how a T-shirt thing came to me. And as I was writing more of these, or I was accumulating more of these, some of them didn't fit T-shirts, but they would have lent themselves to illustrated captions. Mm-hmm. And once I got over here and I put out Gangsters, I had an agent at the time, and she said that would not sell. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't stop writing them, but what I did was start writing, or not intentionally, but it gave me the freedom to write stuff that did not need illustration. That was a standalone, like some of the things I just read. But with after you get to 300, 400, I cleaned them out. Took the questionable ones and kept the good ones, and rinse and repeat. And when I got 400 good ones, that's when I started doing what I told you about, reading other books to see how they handled it. And so it was a process, and it wasn't, I want to write something. That's, I just, without trying to be falsely humble, I just had, when I told you, I came back with 3 books in my head, only one of which I knew about at the time. Mm-hmm. And I'm almost through with all of them. So, I guess this is our last interview, because you're certainly not going to want to interview me to what I'm writing now.
That was my next question.
No way. This is going to be the challenge with this book is that I'm going to have to find a university press. It's, psychoanalysis, ancient and medieval Japanese history. And, I see your eyes glaze over right now with that, because it's, yeah.
Well, my son-in-law is Japanese, so you never know.
I saw that. Yeah, right. I didn't know, what form of Asian, because there's a mix, but, how does your daughter, how are they doing, in other words? Because I didn't do well, and part of it was cultural.
Well, he was born in Japan, and both his parents were Japan, but his mom got remarried, and ended up with a soldier. So they came and lived here. But his first language was Japanese until he was, I think, 7 or 8 or 9 years old. He didn't know any other language but Japanese. So, yeah.
Okay, so he's been enculturated, but from my experience, and I went out with a few girls who were first or second generation Japanese, and they didn't know what culture they belonged in, because their parents were 100% full blown, and they were second generation. So they had this conflict of you do it the Japanese way, and all their friends were saying, "Why are you doing that? Do it the American way." And that's a whole different cultural demographic, and they really are many of them are in no man's land. Some adjust better than others, but it's, if at all possible, I recommend anybody getting, a different perspective on your own culture, because it not only gives you a greater sense of what's wrong with it, but what's right with it. Yep. And I happen to be in advertising, so I had to explain a lot of things to Japanese clients. So I had to be able to put these things in words, in coherent sentences. And that really I discovered a lot of things while I was doing that. And a lot of that stuff that I discovered that went into Gangsters, in little snippets, because I wrote Gangsters with a lesson in mind. There was one main lesson for each chapter. And so that me being forced to think about, well, why is an American and why is a Japanese was very beneficial. But like I said, that's also there's a lot of that as foundation for Reality Bites. A lot of that experience has gone into you can't tell, but it's there.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. Immersing yourself into someone else's culture, because my husband's native in Mexico, so it's like we have United Nations going on in our family.
Hey, look, that can be a blessing or it can be a disaster. And when it works, there's nothing better, and everybody gains. It's like my father lived with me and my son. And that was I didn't get along very well with him, but those two, my son and my father, got along beautifully. And it was a huge help to Evan having that extra authority figure who didn't exercise his authority in the household. It was something that my father taught him phonics, and, he didn't spoil him, but he was another source he was a second parent. And so, yeah, if you can make it work, then hats off to you. And I think it will be to your great advantage in the long run, and probably your grandchildren's advantage. The tolerance that, and the expanded understanding that they will get from being in that environment. So, kudos to you and yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now, you said you have that book coming out, or you're writing it in the process of it right now.
I just finished the rough draft, and I have to write the book proposal and get a university press. So don't hold your breath, please.
So what else do you do besides write the book? Are you still doing the copyright, or is this something you're doing in retirement?
I don't have time to do that anymore. And until I was 55, I thought I was going to be easing into a graceful retirement, and my son blew the hell out of the water. But basically what I'm doing right now at 71, and hope I have the time to finish it, is tying up loose ends, because in Japan, I was busy, I was working, I was playing around, and I started a lot of things, but I never finished any. And Gangsters was the first thing I really finished, because that took 30 years, off and on. I'd come to a block, I'd get writer's block, put it off for another 5 years, and, do the same thing. So right now, and I mean, being a parent is a full-time job. I don't have to tell you that. So right now, my son, Evan, is, he wants to study architecture, and he's going to App State, and he's been gradually increasing his enthusiasm for this. So I've been trying to guide him into what it takes to be a self-sufficient individual, because one of the downsides of being an older parent, I'm 71, he's 17, is that I'm not going to be around for, a long time. My father died a year and a half ago. He was 97. I was 69. And having him around was a different dynamic from my relationship with my son. But at the same time, being an older, there are advantages, because when you're 25, you don't know your ass from your elbow. And at 55, I could give him the guidance that he really needed. And luckily, it's hard. Okay, it's hard to bring a kid back when they once they start to go wrong. It's easy to keep them on the straight and narrow if you do it from the beginning. And like I said, my father was here. He helped teach him, phonics and other things. And I grew up in the 60s. I was a child of the 60s. I did all the things that 60s kids did, lied to my parents. But I think that today's kids have it much harder. There's more pressure on them, blah, 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 blah. The relationships are even more screwed up than they were in my day. But so I had a good relationship with my parents, but I really didn't give anything back until I finally came home. I had no idea that I would get such a return on my investment with my son, who, my father was a very serious guy. He was a child of the Depression, and a lot of it skipped a generation. And so I consider myself very lucky. And I'm Evan's gonna stay around with me for 1 year, do virtual classes at App State, and then I'm gonna figure out what to do with my own life and just let him go and do it like that. I'll probably be writing a lot of one-liners about empty nesting and things like that in the future. But it's I feel very lucky. It sounds like you're pretty lucky yourself. So.
Yeah, it's so funny that you said about architecture, because my middle daughter just actually graduated with her interior architecture degree from UNC Greensboro. So I was like, there's so many similarities here. But I really applaud you for taking on parenthood at such a later stage.
It wasn't planned.
Oh, okay. But still, you could have actually, you didn't have to stand up. You could have actually just walked away, but you didn't.
No, we were married. Evan's mother and I were married. But we weren't planning on having a kid, because I was 55 and in a different, it's not great to be old in a different culture. And that was one of the reasons that I brought the family back here, because I did want to help take care of my mother, but there was that stability, and that, boy, not being in Japan still eats at me after 15 years. But as far as Evan is concerned, I did the right thing. It was, having him grow up in Japan and having him grow up in Cary, which is, has a lot of greenery, but there are cultural events, blah, 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 good schools, good athletic facilities, et cetera, et cetera. I certainly wouldn't, I've given up on dating, but the first thing I thought when I got here, after having been in Tokyo for all those years, was, boy, I'm glad I'm not a bachelor here. And so I'm way past all that now, but it's been good for him, and I'm glad we're here. And America's a great place in many ways. So,
yep, that's so true. And our time is almost up. So, is there one last little nugget that you want to leave people with?
I'm not sure if it's a nugget, but if you go to Amazon.com and type in reality can be okay, but mostly blah, 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 you will come to the first version. Apparently, the sales for the second version have not superseded the sales for the first version. And when that happens, you will go directly to the blue cover. But this is the tan cover you will go to, and you have to click on that before you find out that the tan cover is not available, no longer in print, and there's another one. So it's kind of an Easter egg hunt. In fact, I checked last night, but on Barnes & Noble and in other bookstores, it's there with no, hoops to jump through to get to it. But I'm not sure how much of a promotional conversation this has been for Reality Bites, but I enjoyed talking.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on Chats from the Blog Cabin and sharing your life. I mean, honestly, I think you dropped a lot of nuggets as we were chatting. So,
well, it's been a pleasure, and it's nice to know that I have a similarly international little cluster not far away, and I'll try to tune in from time to time.
So, guys, once again, Gordon, thank you for coming on, and we will see you on the next chat from the Blog Cabin. Guys, have a blessed day.
Thank you so much.